evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a fair Sunday night. I bid you hello, wearing my Earl Warren Cup 2013 shirt, a tribute to my friend Mr. Adams, who went out today and ran the Disneyland half marathon. Good job, my man. Also found time to be a good dad and root for his Niners, and probably read some government as well and split some atoms. Dude does everything. Last night I was at the formal. King Asani, Queen Julie, Prince Patrick, Princess Katie. I tell you, it was a great night. Great night. We're going to do the last part here of Teddy Roosevelt and Taft and Wilson and wrap it all up and send it down the line. Hopefully less than 15 minutes. So let's start. We're here on page 4 of the study guide, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Teddy Roosevelt. Roosevelt is going to change the direction of the American presidency. Prior to Teddy Roosevelt, and especially in the period right before him with the Gilded Age presidencies, many of the presidents in America thought that the role of the president should be pretty subdued. Sit back, wait for something to happen, allow the Congress to do the governing, the courts to determine the laws, and really to allow big business to steer the ship of American society. Not Teddy Roosevelt. This was his moose, and he was steering the bad boy. So, when we look at Roosevelt's square deal, we begin to discuss some of the policies that Roosevelt had for America. Roosevelt, in 5 of the areas here, acted in order to try and assure that American society got a fair shake in everything that it did. So we'll start at the top with conservation. Teddy Roosevelt was the world's first granola. Hey, my wife just came home. Say hi, honey.
Hi.
Fantastic. Okay. Roosevelt believed that America should preserve its natural outdoor areas in order to assure that our later generations had the opportunity to see them. If, for instance, we allowed business to do whatever it wanted to do, there was a good chance that business would turn Yosemite and Sierra and Sequoia and Yellowstone and all those fabulous areas into big strip mining areas and huge industrial factories, and that just wasn't right. While President Roosevelt protected over 200 million acres of land and assured that the nation kept track of its outdoor areas, organized labor. In the midst of a coal strike, or a threatened coal strike in 1906, Roosevelt did something that no president had done thus far. He actually cared about labor. Up until now, as we've seen at the Homestead incident and also at Pullman, if you're the leadership of the country and the workers get in the way, you bring down the hammer. That's what they did at Homestead, and that's what President Cleveland did at Pullman. But Roosevelt believed that the American people had a right to get coal. They had a right to not freeze. And he really isn't so much siding with labor here as he is assuring that we don't have a coal strike in the dead of winter. So when he brings the United Mine Workers and also the owners of the mine to the White House in 1906, what he's saying is figure it out. Figure it out, act like adults, and do what's best for the American people, or I'll crack your head. Probably that last part was parenthetical and implied, but I like to assume that it might have happened. That would have been some good news. Trust busting. This is the area Roosevelt gets the most reputation for. The busting of trusts, the breaking up of businesses that were considered to be too big for their own good. Okay? Roosevelt didn't think that every trust was bad. But if a trust was abusing its size, for instance, if it was using its dominance of the market in order to assure that it could raise the prices or control the prices in a way that was unfair, that was bad. So Roosevelt broke up trusts individually. Now, his main weapon for doing this is the 1890 Sherman Antitrust Act, which is a pretty vague piece of legislation that bans businesses or trusts that are in, here's the quote, in restraint of trade. If they were in restraint of trade, businesses could be broken up. No president up until then had really used the Sherman Antitrust Act much, but Roosevelt thought that he should. Railroads. The railroads, going all the way back to our friends the Populists, were considered to be real scavengers on human society. Because if there's only 1 or 2 railroads, they can use that position to dominate the economy, develop a monopoly of price, and scoop all the money out of the farmers' pockets. If I'm a farmer living in Topeka, Kansas, and I have to ship my grain to Chicago, if there's only 1 railroad, I'm at their mercy. Roosevelt used the government's power in order to assure that there were set prices, sort of maximum prices that could be charged for those journeys, and also assured that whatever the size of the company you owned, the railroad companies gave you a fair price. So in other words, you can't give a better price to a huge company than you would give to a really small company. That sort of thing was no good. Last one, food and consumers. So Roosevelt's sitting there one morning eating his breakfast. And apparently, while doing so, reading The Jungle or reading an excerpt of The Jungle, and he goes nuts about how these muckrakers are driving him crazy. But what Roosevelt comes to find out is that there are some pretty hideous conditions going on in America's food-making plants, and he uses that discovery in order to push through legislation like the Pure Food and Drug Act, the Meat Inspection Act, and also creates the Department of Agriculture in order to assure that food is going to be taken care of. Flipping the page. Unfortunately, Roosevelt's next in line didn't really live up to the bidding. Sometimes we assume that presidents are going to be great. We think that the next in line will be fantastic because the first was, right? That's not always the way it works. Sometimes movies are fantastic, and then the second one you go, what happened here? It's kind of the reverse Hunger Games model, where the first one was horrible and the second one was good. If you didn't see either movie, you lost me there. Okay? But William Howard Taft was Roosevelt's chosen successor to the presidency, and when he arrived, Roosevelt thought that he would lay the agenda for the progressive movement in Taft's lap, and Roosevelt would go off and do all sorts of manly things, and Taft would take care of business. He didn't. In 3 events, a tariff that was too friendly to Easterners and also not low enough in its rates, the Ballinger-Pinchot affair, where Taft fired Gifford Pinchot, one of Roosevelt's best friends, over the fact that Pinchot ratted out his boss, Richard Ballinger, for stealing land, and also trust busting. Taft broke up some of the trusts that even Teddy had signed off on. In all 3 of those events, the relationship between the 2 men, which had been friendly, went to icy and then broken. In 1912, Teddy Roosevelt is going to storm back into the country looking for his nomination. He wants the Republican Party back. He wants William Howard Taft out, and he wants a 3rd term. No one's done that before, but Teddy thinks it's time for someone to take over and to begin moving the country in the direction before it's too late. Let's talk about Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy, which is probably the more well-known side of it, big stick diplomacy, that America should make its way through the world quietly, calmly, and if necessary, with a big stick, in order to let people know that once in a while, when we need to bring the noise, we bring the noise. Okay? For instance, in the Panama Canal situation, we tried to buy from the Colombians Panama. We tried to pay them for the right to a canal zone. Didn't work. And in the long run, America ended up funding a revolution in Panama to overthrow the Colombians and then made an agreement with the new Panamanian government. How's that big stick diplomacy, Holliday? Well, we didn't necessarily get fully involved, but what Teddy Roosevelt's saying is that that canal, which not only links American imperial possessions across the globe, but also assures the fast movement of products from one ocean to the other, that canal is important for mankind. And if the Colombians are going to be so greedy as to not allow us to build that canal there, then we're just going to have to bring the big stick down and make it happen. The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine makes the point that America will watch out for its own backyard, that the countries in the Western Hemisphere are not just off limits to Europeans, but that they are considered to be a part of our domain, not official territories or holdings like you would say with Guam or Puerto Rico or Cuba, but territories that if they started to lose traction, if they economically had problems or politically had instability, that we would go in and set things straight. Now, these countries aren't going to invite us. We're going to invite ourselves. That's us. The open door note. Roosevelt thought that we deserved a chance to trade with the Chinese. The Chinese had become the real trading gem of the late 19th century with the European partners. All the European countries had set up spheres of influence of China. We, unfortunately, were a little late to the party. Roosevelt felt that that was unfair and that we deserved a spot there. Taft's dollar diplomacy. Taft thought that perhaps the United States was going about things the wrong way. That instead of using American influence to make everyone into these drones of us, that what we should do is we should use American influence to open doors for business. That we should go in, use American foreign policy might, and by doing so guarantee jobs for workers from America or opportunities for American businesses. Flipping the page, the new nationalism and the new freedom. In 1912, America has 3 really tempting choices. In fact, they have 4 really tempting choices. You have former President Theodore Roosevelt putting forward his new nationalism. The current president, William Howard Taft, who we're not going to talk about much here because Taft doesn't do very well in 1912, but keep in mind he's the incumbent president. He deserves some time. And we have the newcomer to politics, the freshly minted governor of New Jersey, the former president of Princeton, our man Woodrow Wilson and his new freedom. They also have the socialist candidate, Eugene V. Debs, who's going to pull over 1 million votes. And you're going to say, well, 1 million, is that a ton, Holliday? 1 million out of about 15 million for a socialist in the United States of America following our greatest period of economic expansion to date. I tell you something. A lot of Americans thought we needed to go down a different road. What is the new nationalism? It's a pretty broad set of ideas that Roosevelt is proposing. We're going to use government in order to supervise businesses. We're going to assure that those businesses don't get out of line. We're going to provide a lot of social welfare that hadn't been provided before. Roosevelt even starts getting behind women's suffrage, pretty radical ideas for 1912. Wilson's plan, on the other hand, you'll notice is a little bit far to the right here. Wilson's going to run down the middle. Wilson plays this election perfectly. He understands that Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft are going to split the Republican vote. Taft's going to keep the mainline Republicans. Roosevelt's going to steer a little bit more to the left than Taft, and by doing so, he's going to lose some of the mainline Republicans and pick up some more progressive voices, but he's not going to pick up enough to really challenge the Democrats. And the Democrats, who have been out of the White House now since 1892, are going to push their way back into the White House by making sure that their man Wilson wins. Now, Wilson only gets about 42% of the vote. 42% of the vote is not that spectacular, but, and here's the important but, that's enough to win. That's enough to make the Electoral College actually not that close that year, and it allows our man Wilson to come steaming in. The first Democrat to actually win since the 1892 election. I suppose the Democrats would have left in 1896, though. Okay, Grover Cleveland leaving for William McKinley. Okay, and in comes Wilson. What does Wilson want to do? Wilson achieves, in the first 2 years of his presidency, quite a lot. We should say a lot about Wilson here. And now keep in mind, in 1914, World War I is going to start, and that's going to throw this whole thing into a tizzy. But in the first 2 years of his presidency, well done, Wilson. The Underwood Tariff, which cuts most prices in America by about 25%. The Federal Reserve System, a national governing banking system where there's one central bank, 12 district banks, and together they're going to coordinate the flow of money in the economy by the amount that's out there and also the interest rates that we charge. It's the first time we've really had a federal banking system since Andrew Jackson wrecked the Second National Bank in the 1830s. The Federal Trade Commission and the Clayton Act, stronger antitrust policy, trying to assure that America has responsible control over its businesses and social agenda and reform down here. Wilson's going to pass a lot of child and female legislation in order to assure that they're protected in the workplace. There's like a law that assures that railroad workers don't work more than 8 hours in a day. There's a number of things to make the workplace safer. How do we get involved in Mexico? When we talk foreign policy in Wilson, we should talk about World War I. But there's a real little blip at the end of our unit here, and this comes before World War I, where America gets involved with Mexico. Mexico has its first democratic election. It's won by an individual who then gets killed. And Wilson thinks that that's just the height of stealing, that that's not the way it should happen. And so as a result of it, we end up sending troops down and money down to try and aid the democratic movement in Mexico. That's moral diplomacy, that we should use our military might and our economic might in order to aid developing economic countries, in order to aid democratic countries so that there's more like those in the world. And that's the whole unit, ladies and gentlemen. We're going DBQ on Wednesday. We're going multiple choice on Thursday. I hope you're all having a good weekend. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.